Why do you secretly believe that your potential was capped at birth, leaving you to navigate adulthood with a hand you cannot discard?
When you stumble in a new endeavor, why does your inner critic scream that you are a fraud rather than simply suggesting you lack practice? Is your obsession with appearing intelligent actually the very anchor keeping you intellectually stagnant? Consider the last time you faced a truly difficult challenge, one that threatened to expose a gap in your competence. Perhaps it was a high-stakes presentation, a complex creative project, or a new language you swore you would learn. You sit there, staring at the screen or the blank page, and a cold, visceral paralysis sets in. It is not merely the difficulty of the task that freezes you, it is the implication of the struggle. You feel that if you have to try this hard, you must not be good at it. You interpret the friction of learning not as the heat of progress, but as evidence of a deficit. In that moment, your ego creates a binary trap. You must either deliver perfection instantly to prove your worth, or you must disengage entirely to protect your identity. You choose the latter. You procrastinate, you self-sabotage, or you feign indifference, telling yourself you didn't really care anyway. This is not a lack of willpower. It is not laziness. It is the symptom of a deeply encoded psychological operating system that dictates how you interpret every success and every failure in your life. Most people move through the world under the illusion that their abilities are assets they possess, like coins in a vault, fixed, quantifiable, and finite. They believe they are math people or creative types, natural leaders or introverted followers. They spend their lives trying to spend these coins carefully, terrified of bankruptcy, constantly seeking validation that their vault is full. This belief system is the invisible architect of mediocrity. It is the fixed mindset, a term popularized by psychologist Carol Dweck, but often diluted into a banal platitude about positivity. It is not about positivity. It is about the fundamental physics of your self-perception. Opposing this is the growth mindset, an alternative paradigm where abilities are not assets to be protected, but muscles to be torn and rebuilt. Understanding the distinction between these two frameworks is not merely an academic exercise. It is the single most critical factor in determining whether you will live a life of defensive anxiety or expansive mastery. To dismantle the mental prison you have built, we must first map its walls with forensic precision. We begin by establishing a taxonomy of these internal realities, for you cannot fight a ghost you cannot name. The problem is not the external world, the problem is the lens through which you process the data of the world. At the core of the fixed mindset lies the belief in the immutable self. This is the conviction that your basic qualities, your intelligence, your talent, your moral character, are carved in stone. Under this paradigm, you view yourself as a finished product rather than a work in progress. This creates an urgent, ceaseless need to prove yourself over and over. If you only have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, then you'd better prove that you have a healthy dose of them. It simply wouldn't do to look or feel deficient in these most basic characteristics. In this static taxonomy, every situation becomes a courtroom where your value is on trial. A conversation with a colleague isn't just an exchange of information, it is a test of your wit. A difficult project isn't a learning opportunity, it is a hazardous diagnostic exam that might reveal you are not as smart as you pretend to be. The primary directive of the fixed mindset is validation. The psychological currency here is looking smart at all costs. Because the self is viewed as an entity with a fixed volume of talent, any effort required to achieve a result is viewed with deep suspicion. To the fixed mindset, effort is for those who lack the gift. If you were a genius, you wouldn't need to study. If you were a natural athlete, you wouldn't need to train so hard. Therefore, exerting effort is terrifying because it risks robbing you of your excuses. If you try your hardest and fail, you are left with the naked conclusion that you are not enough. However, if you do not try and fail, you can maintain the comforting illusion that you could have succeeded had you only applied yourself. Contrast this with the taxonomy of the growth mindset, which operates on the belief in the incremental self. Here, the hand you are dealt is just the starting point for development. This belief does not imply that anyone can be anything, that anyone with proper motivation can become Einstein or Beethoven, but rather that a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable, that it is impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training. The primary directive shifts from validation to development. The goal is not to prove you are smart, but to become smarter. In this dynamic framework, the meaning of failure undergoes a radical transmutation. In the fixed mindset, failure is an identity. I am a failure. It is a permanent label stamped on your forehead. In the growth mindset, failure is an action. I failed at this task. It is data. It is a piece of feedback indicating a discrepancy between your current strategy and the requirements of the task. It is information to be harvested, not a judgment to be feared. Consequently, the perception of effort flips entirely. Effort is no longer evidence of incompetence. It is the very mechanism of competence. It is the specific neurological process by which the brain rewires itself to accommodate new skills. We must also dissect the nuanced subtraits that branch out from these core definitions, specifically regarding how we view the success of others. In the taxonomy of the fixed mindset, life is a zero-sum game. If intelligence and talent are scarce, fixed resources, then the success of another person is a direct threat to your status. When a peer succeeds, the fixed mindset reacts with envy and defensive rationalization. You might find yourself searching for flaws in their achievement or attributing their success to luck or unfair advantages. Their light casts a shadow on you, diminishing your relative standing in the hierarchy of naturals. This triggers a retreat reaction. You distance yourself from high performers to protect your fragile self-esteem. Conversely, the growth mindset taxonomy categorizes the success of others as a proof of concept. If abilities can be cultivated, then another person's achievement is simply a roadmap. It demonstrates what is possible. Instead of feeling threatened, the growth-oriented individual feels curiosity. How did they do that? What strategies did they use that I am currently missing? The emotion triggered is not envy, but inspiration, followed immediately by inquiry.
Furthermore, we must identify the talent trap as a specific pathology within the fixed mindset. This often afflicts those who were labeled gifted or smart early in childhood. When a child is constantly praised for their innate traits, "You're so smart, you're a natural," they internalize the belief that their performance is a direct reflection of this innate quality. They become addicted to the dopamine hit of easy praise. As they age and challenges inevitably exceed their natural aptitude, they hit a wall. Because they have never learned to separate their identity from their immediate performance, this wall feels like an existential execution. They crumble. They are the adults who are paralyzed by perfectionism, refusing to ship a product or submit a draft until it is flawless, because any flaw would shatter the gifted label they have clung to for decades. This is the tragic irony of the fixed mindset. In a desperate attempt to protect their status as smart, these individuals avoid the very challenges that would actually make them smarter. They choose short-term validation over long-term growth, essentially cannibalizing their future to feed their ego in the present. The taxonomy extends to how we handle feedback. To the fixed mindset, feedback is a personal attack. If you are a finished product, then criticism suggests you are a defective product. You become defensive, you filter out the useful information, and you focus entirely on the tone of the delivery rather than the content of the message. You might say, "My boss is just mean," completely ignoring the valid point that your report was poorly researched. The ego constructs a shield to deflect the incoming data, preserving the self-image, but ensuring that the error remains uncorrected. The growth mindset, operating on the premise of development, views feedback as a navigational correction. It may sting, the ego is never completely silent, but the intellectual override engages. The mindset asks, is this true? Can this help me improve? The feedback is separated from the self-worth. You are not your work. You are the architect of your work, and the architect needs blueprints to build better structures. Ultimately, this phase of understanding requires you to acknowledge that these are not merely attitudes. They are comprehensive cognitive frameworks that filter every photon of reality that enters your eyes. They determine your latency in recovering from setbacks. They dictate your stress levels. They influence who you marry, how you raise your children, and how you lead your teams. The fixed mindset is a world of constant judgment, a rigid hierarchy where you must fight to maintain your position. The growth mindset is a world of constant becoming, a fluid landscape where the only true failure is the cessation of effort. Recognizing which world you currently inhabit is the first step toward migrating to the other. To understand why these divergent beliefs hold such sway over our destiny, we must look beyond mere attitude and examine the neurophysiological machinery operating beneath the surface. It is a mistake to view mindset simply as software running on the hardware of the brain. Rather, the mindset dictates how the hardware itself is utilized, rewired, and optimized. When we peer into the cranial black box using electroencephalography, EEG, and functional magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, we see that the fixed and growth mindsets are not just philosophical outlooks, but distinct modes of neural processing. They represent two fundamentally different algorithms for handling information, particularly information that signals failure or discrepancy.
Consider the brain as a sophisticated prediction engine. Its primary job is to predict outcomes based on current sensory data and past experiences. When a prediction fails, when you miss a basketball shot, fail a math problem, or receive critical feedback at work, the brain generates an error signal. This is where the biological divergence begins. In a landmark study conducted at Michigan State University, neuroscientists observed the electrical activity of brains in real time as subjects made mistakes. They identified two distinct waveforms: the error-related negativity, ERN, an automatic neural reaction that occurs between 50 and 100 milliseconds after a mistake, and the error positivity, PE, a slower, more conscious processing signal that occurs between 200 and 500 milliseconds later. The ERN is the brain's immediate "oh no" response. It is reflexive and present in almost everyone, regardless of mindset. However, the PE signal, the waveform associated with attention, allocation of cognitive resources, and memory consolidation, reveals the stark difference in neural architecture. In subjects with a fixed mindset, the PE signal is remarkably muted. The moment the error is detected via the ERN, the brain effectively shuts down its processing centers regarding that specific event. It disengages. The neural logic is defensive. If the error is interpreted as a permanent indictment of intelligence or capability, the brain minimizes the psychological threat by diverting attention away from the stimuli. It is a form of cognitive blinding. Conversely, in the growth mindset brain, the PE signal is amplified. Upon detecting an error, the brain recruits more neurons to the side of the discrepancy. It engages in hyperfocus. This is not merely an emotional resilience, it is a superior allocation of metabolic resources. The brain is actively dissecting the error, comparing the intended outcome with the actual result, and updating its internal models. This process promotes neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. We can visualize this through the metaphor of a vast, overgrown forest representing the potential of the mind. Learning is the act of blazing a trail through this vegetation. The first time you attempt a complex task, the underbrush is thick and progress is slow. This is the cognitive friction we experience as difficulty. Biologically, this friction corresponds to the firing of unmyelinating or thinly myelinated neurons. Myelin is the fatty sheath that insulates axons, allowing electrical signals to travel at high speeds. Each time you traverse a specific neural pathway, and critically, every time you stop to correct your course after stumbling, specialized cells called oligodendrocytes wrap more layers of myelin around those axons. The fixed mindset acts as a gatekeeper that forbids entry into the thickest parts of the forest. Because it prioritizes the appearance of effortless competence, it views the struggle of bushwhacking as evidence of distinct unsuitability for the terrain. Consequently, the trails remain faint, the myelin layers remain thin, and the neural highways required for mastery are never constructed. The growth mindset, by privileging the process of struggle over the immediate result, essentially operates as a heavy-duty road paving crew. It interprets the friction not as a stop sign, but as the sensation of construction.
The very discomfort that causes the fixed mindset to retreat is the precise biological signal the growth mindset uses to direct the heavy machinery of neuroplasticity to the site of the deficit.
This neural mechanism explains the why behind the stagnation of the fixed mindset. It is not that these individuals cannot learn, it is that their core belief system initiates a physiological stress response that inhibits the consolidation of memory and the refinement of skill. When the ego is threatened by an error, the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the center of executive function and logic, and shifts the brain into a state of fight or flight. In this state, learning is physiologically impossible because the brain is prioritizing immediate safety over long-term adaptation. The fixed mindset individual is neurologically prioritizing the preservation of the self-image over the expansion of the self. This biological reality segues inevitably into a behavioral loop, a vulnerability so insidious that it functions like a psychological quicksand. This is the trap of the validation-seeking cycle. Once the core belief is established, that qualities are carved in stone, and that performance is a direct readout of innate value, the individual becomes trapped in a perpetual state of auditing. Every situation is evaluated not for its potential to provide growth, but for its potential to provide judgment. The question constantly running in the background of the psyche shifts from, "How can I solve this?" to, "Will I look smart or dumb?" The trap creates a paradoxical relationship with effort, which is perhaps the most debilitating symptom of the fixed mindset. In this paradigm, effort is viewed as a deficit. The logic follows a twisted syllogism. If you are a genius, things come easily. If you have to work hard, you are not a genius. Therefore, high effort is evidence of low ability. This creates a terrifying vulnerability where the individual is afraid to try because the very act of trying strips away the protective veneer of natural talent. This leads to the phenomenon of self-handicapping. When facing a challenge that threatens to reveal the limits of their ability, the fixed mindset individual will unconsciously, or sometimes consciously, sabotage their own preparation. They might procrastinate until the last minute, stay up too late the night before a big presentation, or barely practice for a competition. The psychological utility of this trap is twisted but effective. It provides an external excuse for failure that preserves the internal sense of ability. If they fail, they can say, "I didn't do well because I procrastinated," rather than facing the devastating possibility of, "I did my absolute best and it wasn't good enough." The cycle reinforces itself through confirmation bias. By avoiding challenges to protect their ego, the fixed mindset individual misses out on the very experiences that would stimulate the myelination and neural growth described earlier. As a result, their skills actually do plateau or atrophy compared to their peers who embrace challenges. This lack of progress then serves as proof that they simply don't have the gene for that skill, reinforcing the fixed belief. Furthermore, this trap fosters a fragile identity structure. When self-worth is tethered to external metrics, grades, salaries, accolades, the individual is only as good as their last success. This makes them risk-averse to a pathological degree. They drift towards low-hanging fruit, choosing tasks they know they can execute perfectly rather than stretching for goals that might result in a stumble. Over time, their world shrinks. They become trapped in a comfort zone prison, where the walls are made of their own fear of being seen as imperfect. They maintain the illusion of competence by strictly limiting the scope of their reality to the things they have already mastered, effectively halting their own evolution in a desperate bid to prove they have finished evolving. This interaction creates a profound vulnerability to feedback. In the fixed mindset trap, constructive criticism is not processed as data on how to improve a task, it is received as an assassination attempt on the character. Because the work and the self are fused, this paragraph is unclear, is translated by the defensive brain into, "You are not a good writer." The emotional pain of this interpretation triggers the amygdala's defensive response, causing the individual to reject the feedback, blame the judge, or disengage entirely. They are locked in a cycle where they desperately need validation to sustain their self-esteem, but their need for validation prevents them from doing the deep, difficult, error-prone work required to actually become competent. They are stuck protecting a statue of themselves, dusting it off and guarding it, while the growth mindset individual is out in the mud, building a skyscraper. To radically alter your trajectory, you must first dismantle the fundamental philosophy that keeps the fixed mindset alive.
the erroneous belief that your identity is a finished sculpture. We are culturally conditioned to view adulthood as a destination, a point of arrival where our traits, intelligence, and capabilities are calcified. Under this paradigm, every interaction becomes a courtroom trial where your value is judged. If you believe your capacity is static, then every mistake is an indictment, and every struggle is evidence of a fatal flaw. This is the heavy psychological burden of the fixed mindset, the constant need to prove you have it because you believe you cannot acquire it. The reframe requires a shift from viewing yourself as a static entity to viewing yourself as a dynamic process. You must move from the philosophy of being to the philosophy of becoming. Consider the biological reality of your brain. It is not a hard drive with a set storage limit or a processor with a fixed clock speed. It is a dense forest of neural pathways that physically change structure based on usage. When you struggle with a new concept, you are not hitting a genetic ceiling. You are experiencing the friction of neurogenesis. The frustration you feel is not a stop sign. It is the sensation of myelin sheaths wrapping around new neural connections. Once you embrace this biological truth, the emotional landscape shifts. Effort is no longer a badge of shame that indicates a lack of talent. Effort becomes the specific mechanism by which intelligence is created. In the fixed mindset, having to try hard means you aren't smart. In the growth mindset, trying hard is the only way to become smart. This philosophical inversion liberates you from the terror of failure. If you are a finished product, failure defines you. If you are a work in progress, failure informs you. It ceases to be an identity crisis and simply becomes data, neutral, actionable feedback on your current strategy. You stop asking, "Am I good at this?" and start asking, "How do I learn this?" The ego, which was once a fragile glass ornament terrified of shattering, becomes a muscle that strengthens under tension. This philosophical shift opens the door to the practical application of the growth mindset, moving us from abstract theory to the concrete architecture of daily life. The goal is not to eradicate the fixed mindset entirely, because the desire for safety and validation is human, but to build a dominant growth response that overrides the initial fear. This requires a toolkit of specific cognitive and behavioral interventions designed to rewire your default reactions to challenge and criticism.
The first and most potent tool is the linguistic reframe of "not yet." When you hit a wall in your career, your relationships, or your personal skills, the fixed mindset screams, "I can't do this." It puts a period at the end of the sentence, sealing your fate. You must consciously intervene and add the word "yet." I can't understand this data, yet. I am not good at public speaking, yet. This small linguistic appendage bridges the gap between your current reality and your future potential. It signals to your subconscious that the current deficit is temporary and surmountable, essentially instructing your brain to remain in problem-solving mode rather than shutting down in defeat. The second tool involves divorcing the process from the outcome. In a high-performance society, we are addicted to the result, the grade, the promotion, the accolades. However, obsessing over the outcome triggers the fear of missing it, which pushes us back towards safe, fixed mindset behaviors. To counter this, you must aggressively practice praising the process. When you succeed, do not congratulate yourself on being smart or talented. Congratulate yourself on the strategy, the focus, and the persistence that led to the result. When you fail, do not condemn your ability. Critique the process. Ask, is there a different strategy I haven't tried? Did I allocate enough time? Who can I ask for mentorship? By focusing on the how rather than the who, you maintain agency. You cannot control your genetics, but you can always control your strategy. Furthermore, you must actively seek out desirable difficulties. The fixed mindset urges you to coast on your strengths, to stay in the warm glow of what you already know. The growth mindset demands that you intentionally place yourself in the zone of proximal development, that uncomfortable space just beyond your current competence, where failure is likely, but learning is guaranteed. If you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. You must habituate the feeling of being a novice. Start a project you are unqualified for. Pick up a skill that makes you feel clumsy.
By voluntarily exposing yourself to the vulnerability of not knowing, you desensitize your ego to the sting of imperfection. You teach your brain that confusion is not a threat to your safety, but a precursor to expansion. Finally, we must address the role of criticism. In the fixed mindset, criticism is perceived as an attack on your worth. To adopt a growth trajectory, you must reframe criticism as a free consulting service. When someone points out a flaw in your work or behavior, suppress the defensive reflex to justify yourself. Instead, treat the feedback as a map revealing the blind spots in your development. You don't have to agree with every critique, but you must mine it for truth. The ability to listen to negative feedback without crumbling is the ultimate superpower of the growth mindset, as it allows you to utilize other people's perspectives to accelerate your own evolution.
Ultimately, adopting a growth mindset is not about unbounded optimism or ignoring your limitations. It is about a realistic understanding of human potential. It is the recognition that while we all start with different genetic endowments and circumstances, our destination is not pre-written. The true tragedy of the fixed mindset is not that it prevents success, but that it prevents self-discovery. It keeps you trapped in a small, safe box of what you already are, denying you the adventure of finding out what you could become. The path forward is clear, though it is not easy. It requires constant vigilance against the whisper of the fixed mindset that seeks to keep you small. It requires the courage to be imperfect in public and the resilience to view setbacks as setups for a comeback. But the reward is a life of infinite texture and depth. When you stop worrying about proving yourself and start committing to improving yourself, the world stops being a judge and starts being a classroom. You are no longer defined by your history, but by your horizon. Do not wait for a crisis to force this change. Start today. Identify one area of your life where you have declared, "I am just not good at this," and challenge that assumption. Replace the period with a question mark. Replace "I can't" with "I haven't learned how." Step out of the sanctuary of the known and into the fertile chaos of growth. Your potential is not a fixed point to be measured. It is a territory to explore. Walk into it. Remember, talent is just the starting point. Your mindset is what determines where you finish. Don't let a fixed belief keep you average. Choose to grow every single day.
If you found value in this, hit subscribe and welcome to the 1% Perspective. I'll see you in the next video.